The year is 2010, November. 14 years ago, almost exactly to the day, an undergraduate from Exeter University, Andrew Young, is conducting an experiment with one of these. This is a Neolithic stone ball, up to 4,500 years old, a petrosphere, and it had puzzled archaeologists and academics alike for hundreds of years. The puzzle was, what exactly are these objects and what are they used for? Now, if Andrew's theory went well, he would solve one of the Stone Age's biggest mysteries. How exactly did the Neolithic people move the 50-ton megalithic stones that we see in the stone circles that remain today? Now, this ball was indeed key to Andrew and his plan, but there was one significant flaw in that plan. Welcome to the story of the Neolithic Stone Age ball that defies logic. So I've just come off the back of Martinsell Hill here in Wiltshire. That's an Iron Age hill fort. Lots of Neolithic finds too. In fact, in this hedge just here, let me show you a significant pit in the ground. Well, that is labelled on the old maps as a Neolithic midden, a rubbish dump, all sorts of old bones and scrapers, you name it. But our journey today is going to head north in that direction because I can see the West Woods. Now, the West Woods are going to help us explain a significant flaw in the plan of Exeter University and their experiment. Let's head that way now and I'll explain. Now, on our way to the West Woods, let's consider some basics of these balls. Now, in archaeology, context is everything. If you find an artifact in its original location, its original layers, it will tell you so much about the object. Now, mine is a 3D printed version, so it doesn't quite give me the feel, but enough to have a good visual. The first issue that adds to this puzzle of this object is the vast majority of these have been found due to the plough. So that's been effective in finding them, but an absolute disaster for telling us anything useful about them, anything about their context. Now, there are a few that do have context and we'll come to those very shortly, but first back to the Exeter problem. Andrew Young had a theory. He had mapped the balls' locations and noted they were quite close to stone circles. So the theory was that these balls could have been used to help transport megaliths from their original location to their chosen site of a stone circle. He made a small model, took some wood and carved a groove in it, placed the balls in the groove equal distance apart, and then mirrored that upside down, creating a platform for a megalith to sit on. Such was the success of the Exeter University plan, well, a TV broadcasting company got hold of the idea and they went full scale. And despite using a slightly softer wood rather than a hard wood, which would have been much more abundant in the landscape, they still had success. They could move 50-ton megaliths using these stone balls. But the flaw that I mentioned, the flaw in all of their plans, was easily explained by the exact location I'm in right now. So this is the West Woods. There's a lot going on here in terms of eras of history, all kinds of prehistory covered. Now, this is also the exact place that the large megaliths for Stonehenge came from, and we're 20-25 miles north of Stonehenge. Now, if you read the paper, the academic paper by the David Nash and his team, Brighton University, well, you can tell which exact valley those stones came from. And so we can start to look at the route that these late Neolithic Stone Age people would have taken from here, 20 or so miles south, to the Henge, and more importantly ask how they would have done that, how they would have moved those 50-ton megaliths. But first, let's take a look at the exact location that these balls were found in, these Neolithic stone carved balls, because then all of a sudden this becomes a problem for this entire Exeter University and beyond theory of moving megaliths. So to date we have around 425 of these Neolithic balls which have been found, and the vast majority in and around Aberdeenshire in Scotland. A small handful in northern England and one in Norway. So noisy chainsaw in the background, but for good reason, because there's a Neolithic long barrow just up on the hill and they're clearing all of the trees from around it so the roots don't do any damage to the long barrow. Interestingly, the long barrow is probably late Neolithic and therefore almost from the same era as the stone balls, and indeed none of these were found in southern Britain. The vast majority are focused on east of the Grampian mountain range and towards the eastern coast of Scotland. There's a couple of outliers and we'll come to those shortly, but we can be very sure that to date none of these have been found in southern England, and certainly not here in the West Woods. We're going to rule out the theory that they were used to move megalithic stones to make the circles that we see today. We now know that the Stonehenge altar stone came from Scotland, so it's safe to say that we clearly had travel and trade up and down this island. So ideas on transportation of megaliths would have travelled too, and we have no balls here in the south. So what were they for? Okay, so let's get down to basics with these balls. Before we try and assess exactly what they're for, we need some more context. You need some more context, because I'm really keen to hear what you think these were for. So there was a paper, an academic paper by Dorothy Marshall, and what she did was bring all of the knowledge of every single find, 425 I think to date, about these balls, everything she could possibly collect in one paper, and that is a fascinating read. So the information that she listed was as follows. 1. The location of the finds, pretty self-explanatory and gives us a real good feel for the main cluster of finds. Not only that, but also the outliers as far as Scotland's West Islands and as far north as Orkney. Number 2, the material they were actually made from. Now the popular theory is that many of these were made from greenstone. In fact, Wikipedia will tell you the vast majority were made from greenstone, but in fact, well, we now tend to split these down into various subcategories. That aside, they seem to be made from various rock types. In fact, Dorothy Marshall states that of the 15 currently in Inverurie Museum, only 2 are not of granite type. This is, as she describes, the heart of the granite area. Number 3, their size. Extraordinarily, their size was something that remains an integral part of the puzzle. You see, the vast majority of these 425 objects found to date are within 1mm of a 70mm diameter. Only 12 are outside of that. And of course, number 4, hardness. The hardness of the rock type didn't seem to matter to those that made or designed these, and with that in mind, we probably have the most important aspect of all to consider. There's one specific area I've not mentioned yet, which Dorothy does in great detail, and that is the design of these objects. They were all very well decorated, including the one I'm holding today, my 3D printed one, I should add. Well, and she classified them into types. Now this was largely based on a number of knobs that they had on the outside, and that ranged significantly. So they fell into type 1, type 2, type 3, etc. And of course a different type which was no knobs but just an amazing amount of decoration. This one's probably a good example of one with no knobs, just pure decoration. That was incredibly useful. Now what this really tells us is they had an incredible skill to make the different designs on these rocks. They weren't polished as such, they were just incredibly well designed in various different ways. But not only that, but it also tells us that they had knowledge of the rocks themselves. By and large, the more intricate the design, or the softer the rock, and they knew that. August 2013, the Ness of Brodgar in Orkney Islands. A significant archaeological dig, more specifically structure 10 Trench P. Archaeologist Molly Bond finds a carved stone ball. Now, we mentioned near the start of this that most of these objects were not found in context, so their use and purpose almost impossible to establish. But this time we have context. This time the stone ball is found purposely placed under a buttress of this structure. So without jumping to conclusions, it was seen that perhaps, at least here, this was done as a foundation deposit for the entire building or structure itself. And then 7 years on, Tres Ness once again in Orkney, a chambered cairn, 3500 BC, and we have 2 more stones found in situ. Not quite the same context, but a Neolithic site nonetheless. So those Orkney finds tell us these balls did travel. Now, I did suggest and promise you that this place, the West Woods, was full of all eras of history. We've had the Neolithic back there, and right here under my feet right now is something that's probably a 600 or 700 AD thereabouts, give or take 100 years either way. This is the Wansdyke, and it was a sort of early Anglo-Saxon, probably some kind of trade barrier, boundary, whatever. But look at this, it spans all the way from sort of Bristol direction right away across towards sort of the Kennet, the Thames. Again, probably a boundary. We're going to cover that in another video, but for the meantime, let's get back on to balls rather than dishes. Now, I'm going to put up a chart. I'm going to put up a chart of all the possible uses, and I'm going to put the pros and the cons. Now's the time I want you to start bashing your keyboard and let me know what you think of all of those listed. Now, there's one specific which I have yet to put on there because that is my theory. But what do you reckon? What do you make of this chart? Tell me in the comments below. Okay, so what do I think this is for? Well, first of all, don't hate on the potential archaeological talk, but consider that I'm not holding a flint, I'm not holding an axe, I'm not holding something of clear, obvious use. I'm holding something that was very location specific. I'm holding something that was intricately designed that probably took a very long time. I'm also holding something that seemed to fit a very specific sizing. So I wonder, do we have something that could have worked for a clan meeting? A conch, for want of a better word. Maybe that is the right word, but if you have the ball, maybe you speak. And then they became more, like the conch shell that calls voices. These stones house sacred significance. It's easier for us to see this as a needless and ineffective item because our shared context and meaning is that at the end of a phone or the local pub. Our lives rarely depend on the weather, the crop, the hunt. We kind of take things for granted and we get by whatever way we do, we just do. But their lives were very different. Everything depended on those things. They connected everything perhaps through ceremony, their heritage, the lineage of their ancestors. All of that was of huge importance and significance to their survival. So maybe, just maybe, that ball crept into that world for them. Now, if you like this video and you want to know more about mystery objects, well, we've got a great one on the Roman dodecahedron. You can watch that just there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you this time next week.